Should our government take the lead in addressing climate change? In the last 20 years, the global temperature has risen an average of 1.1 degrees, and we've witnessed record-breaking hurricane seasons, flooding, droughts, wildfires, and heat waves. We're currently on track for a rise of more than 3 degrees in the next 40 years. Our modern understanding of climate change and CO2 emissions leaves us with a very bleak view of our future, and that can be a scary undertaking. However, when we break down the components of the cause, the actions we can take become clear, and our confidence in our ability to change our course grows. So with that being said, I would like to go over some statistics. In the United States, in 2023, the U.S. Energy Information Administration reported our electricity generation by energy source into percentages. 16% of our energy came from coal, 10.2% from wind, 5.7% from hydropower, and 3.9% from solar. 43% of our power was generated by natural gas, and a whopping 60% from fossil fuels. In my opinion, these numbers are concerning. Considering how many wind turbines surround our East Bay region and how common solar panels are on residential homes, I would have thought that our efforts thus far would have made a bigger dent in the fossil fuel industry. In the United States alone, there are over 980 natural gas power plants that generate roughly 40% of our energy production. Most of these are owned by large international oil tycoons. Not only are these natural gas plants incredibly harmful to local environments, often due to their use of fracking, which is a technique used to crack the crust of the earth to allow gases to seep to the surface and be collected by these plants. The issue with this technique is that they often cannot control where the gases go after they are released, leading to them getting into groundwater and rivers. It has gotten so bad in places near to these fracking plants that the water has come out of nearby residents' houses, out of their faucets and hoses, are literally flammable. But these tycoon companies are usually operating within monopolies that charge unreasonably high rates for the power produced, meaning they have huge revenues and amazing lobbying power to keep their operations running despite the generational horrors that they're inflicting on many Americans. While it may seem like we would not be able to replace the 40% of our energy that natural gas produces, there is an alternative. One would think that to compete with that level of energy production, we would have to invent an entire new industry. But what if I told you that we already did, over 60 years ago, and that it fell victim to one of the biggest smear campaigns the US has ever seen? With only 50 nuclear power plants within the US, nuclear energy is still responsible for almost 20% of the energy we produce. However, many Americans believe that nuclear energy is dangerous and produces tons of toxic waste. Now, while it is true that nuclear energy produces dangerous waste, said waste is carefully captured and stored far out of human reach, with little to no chance of it seeping into local environments, meaning that they can virtually contribute no negative impact in terms of carbon emissions once they are running. And in terms of them being dangerous, the only reason that a nuclear power plant would be dangerous would be due to a meltdown caused by lazy corporations taking advantage of already lackluster regulations that blanket the entire energy sector. Furthermore, in the event of a meltdown, there are many procedures in place and safety mechanisms to prevent anyone from being hurt and to stop meltdowns before they happen. On the other hand, places like Cancer Alley in Texas, which is a region surrounded by coal and natural gas power plants and other manufacturers, has the very well-known byproduct of killing thousands of Americans a year, and there are no plans for any changes to be made. Considering the lack of environmental damage and the efficiency output per plant, I would now like to look at the cost of nuclear power plants. A modern nuclear plant costs around $8 billion to construct. Now I know what you're thinking. Wow, that's a lot of money. And where would we find that much capital? Well, let's look at what our government loves spending our money on the most, our military. The average cost of one US aircraft carrier comes to about $11 billion. To equip each carrier with planes, that's another $5 billion. And each carrier needs at least 3 destroyers to protect it, which each cost $3 billion. So, in total, one carrier squadron costs the US roughly $25 billion. So that means for the cost of one aircraft carrier, we could construct 3 brand new nuclear power plants and still have $1.5 billion. Now, let's look at ExxonMobil, who owns most of the natural gas plants in the United States. Their annual revenue is $285 billion. That means if we were allotted just 1 year of ExxonMobil's yearly revenue, we could theoretically build almost 38 brand new nuclear reactors, which would easily replace the natural gas sector and nearly half our national emissions. With all of this being said, if the federal government could rally against aggressive lobbying and force large oil companies to fit the bill for the construction of a greener power grid in exchange for not pressing charges against them and the crimes they have committed against the planet and millions of Americans, while also decreasing our military budget to be able to maintain these plans and put tighter regulations on the energy sector as a whole, then we can do our part to solve climate change. In conclusion, do better, America, and act now before it's too late.